Rebecca, give me your name, your date of birth, and where you were born.
Okay, my name is Rebecca Evelyn Ninham. Born in Oneida, was raised.
And your name of your mother and father?
And my father's name was Samuel Schuyler, and my mother's name was Esther Schuyler. Esther House Schuyler.
Her maiden name was House.
Yeah, her maiden name was House.
And how many brothers and sisters? Do you remember them?
Let's see, now I gotta come. I got one living and three that passed away.
What were their names? Do you remember?
One was Daniel Schuyler and Edwin Schuyler and Edward. Oh, and then one sister, Delphine Schuyler.
And which one is still living?
Pardon?
Which one is still living?
Lloyd Sky.
That's your brother?
That's my brother. He's at the Norbert Hill Center, working there.
And were you married?
Was I?
Were you married?
Yes, I was married for 61 years.
And what was your husband's name?
Nelson Ninham.
Did you have any children?
Many. I had 12 children.
Wow.
And 9 living.
Do you remember their names?
Yes. Well, the first one that passed away, well, he was in a accident in Milwaukee. His name was Clyde Joseph Ninham, and we called him Baby John because he died at birth. Oh. And my sister's name was Delphine Schuyler.
Any more? Any more of the family?
No, that's three that passed away.
Okay. And when you were a little girl, you were born at home?
When I was little?
Yeah, you were born at home?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And where was your home at? Where was it located?
Oneida. My home?
Yeah, where was it located?
Oneida. It says about we moved here and there when I was a little girl. We lived in Wittenberg, Shipley, Tigerton, and I don't hardly remember because I must have been about 3 years old. So, and then from there, plus when we lived in, and then we lived in Shipley. There was a lot of Winnebagos there, and I was the only Oneida child there. And there was many little girls that I played with, and my mother used to always wonder how come that we played so nice together, because they talked their language and I talked mine. So she said by and by that I talked the Winnebago language. Well, then it kept on. So then after a while, then my dad says, he says, Esther, we have to move from here. He said, because we can't even understand her anymore. So we moved, and for the longest time, my mother said that they had a hard time bringing me back to Oneida language. So then now I don't remember any of that, but that's what she was telling me. So I must have been, say, about 3 years old. So then we moved back to Oneida, and we stayed there. She said, and we didn't go elsewhere. Oh, later on, and my father got a wood cutting job in Bowler. So that's where we moved then to where we were again. then from there on, well, he passed away. In the meantime, he was coming home and got in an accident. Somebody had beaten him up and left him lay wherever they done it. And it was raining and snowing that night. And early in the morning, how they found him was because they had left him lay in a ditch. And this milkman went by, he said, and he saw this lantern down in a ditch. So he was curious about it, so he got out and went down near the ditch, and there he saw a man laying there. So then he called the ambulance or the police. Then the ambulance came, and it took him to Shawano. That's. But we got to see him though, because later on, my uncle Aaron and Joe Green had to come to the hospital and identify the body. So then they went home, and they told my mother that that was him. So then we stayed there in Oneida. The house is still there.
It's still standing?
Huh?
It's still standing, the house?
Yeah, but they kind of remodeled it a little bit.
How would I find the house? How would I find the house?
Yeah. Then later on, Catherine and Dan took the house over, then it was all remodeled over. So that's all
That's a log house, isn't it?
No, there's, well, you know where, wait, the log house over, you know where the log house is? Well, the middle house, that's where.
Can you tell me the story about the log house? How that got there?
Well, not really, I don't remember too much of that, but when it was first brought, well, Oscar had them bring it from Kashina. They hauled the logs from Kashina, and so they put it there where my mother's lot was, and they built it up, so it's still standing there. Now my grandson and his wife are in there now.
Was Oscar related to you? Was Oscar related to you?
Stepfather. Yeah, he was a stepfather, and he worked with the Indians quite a few years. Him and Loretta Matoxen, and they used to go here and there, and they were even at Washington and talked about all the background of the Oneida Nation. But he had some books made, as I remember. Well, I was married then, had children. But I know I used to go up there to the house a lot, and they had a little sun porch, and that's where he had his desk and everything. And he had done a lot of stories in our language. So after a while, a little later in years, when that was after his leg was amputated, and he started to write the dictionary, and he had gone quite a ways with that dictionary in our native language. So anyway, he had a little metal box where he kept his papers and all that stuff that he had written. So he didn't quite finish that dictionary. Now, my mother often wondered, after he passed away, where that metal box went with all those papers. Never found it. So it just simply, but she did have a hunch that he had a nephew from Oklahoma that was visiting there. So evidently that he must have known where all these papers were, and my mother didn't know that. So when he passed away, well, all of a sudden, well, nobody knows where that box went. So that was the end.
When you talk about stories, do you remember any of them that the older people used to tell?
Well, not really. In fact, my mother and my dad never told us anything about the stories.
Did your mother and dad go to boarding school?
My mother did. She went to Flandreau, South Dakota, but my dad never went to school.
What about yourself?
Well, I did. I went to several. I went to Toma, and they, at that time when they registered the children, they had to be 7 years old. But the reason why they took me, I was only 6 when the crew went, and the reason why they took me was because I was going to be 7 in another couple of weeks. That I remember. So there, well, more or less, I was wanting to ride the train, and didn't know a word of English when I went to school. Not a word. And so when I got there, then I didn't know that any better, so I didn't know how I was going to talk their language. So then after a while, then I got the hang of it, that I could talk it a bit. But yet and all, I'd mix my language with it, you know. So I was in kindergarten. So then these other little girls would hear me talk in my language, and then they'd tell the matron, "Oh, Rebecca's talking her language again." And they'd say, "Well, where is she?" "Over there." And say, "All right, Rebecca, you come with me." And she had a scrub pail and a nailing pad, and I had to scrub a long hallway on my hands and knees. That was my punishment. So then again, I tried to talk English, but every time it seemed like I'd mix it, you know, and then these little girls again would say, "Rebecca's talking Oneida again." I said, "Oh," and then I thought, "Oh my goodness." So, well, that time, and the beauty of it was that the matron herself was Oneida, and her name was Lena Charles. Well, that time now, she gave me a big room to scrub next. So that was my punishment. Then that wasn't enough. So when they heard me again, because they either learn or take this, so then she took a little strap, as I remember, and she hit me with that, just enough to make me cry. So either learn or get more punishment like that. But so by and by, then I did begin to learn more English. I never forget that. I said, because I was punished so much because talking my language. Now they're teaching us that. So that's it. And I was so happy when it was time to come home, because we had to sign up for 3 years. Some stayed there, and those that couldn't get their fare there to go home, well, had to stay. But I got my fare every time, so then I went home. And then each year I went back. I wanted to go back on account of this train ride. That's what made me want to go, I suppose, is that train. But then, well, I learned how to talk English a little more then. By that time I went back, so I didn't get no more punishment. So I had to learn the hard way.
So you love to ride the train too?
Huh?
You love to ride the train too?
But I said, for one thing, I said, in my language, in our language, I said, there was never no swearing words. Never. There isn't. No swearing words in our language. Which was nice.
When you came back from school, did you work at home? Or did you work out?
I done little things at home, helped my mother. Done little things and then helped my grandma. And then there's times that my grandfather house would, him and my grandma would come after me with a horse and buggy. And then they lived about 8 miles from us. And I'd go back with them. And then, I thought I had fun out there, on the farm. He had a big farm, a lot of cattle, horses and pigs. The only thing he didn't have was sheep and ducks, but he had chickens. So I loved to go out there.
Now tell me what you remember at the time about Oneida itself. Were there any stores in Oneida?
Well, as I say, I don't remember because I didn't pay too much attention to this stuff. But all I remember that they, back in my father's day, they always had a baseball field in the back of the church, the mission field. And then they always had picnics there, as I remember. Picnics there. But other than that, and they played lacrosse them days. But other than that, I don't remember.
That was at the Stone Church?
Yeah.
Do you remember who the priest was at the Stone Church?
Father Watson was the priest that time.
Were the sisters there?
The sisters were there.
Was there a school there then?
Mm-hmm. There was a school. I went there too.
You went to that school too?
I went to that school. But at that time when I went there, I could talk English. And they had Oneida teachers, and they had the white teachers too. I said they were. I would say they were very nice. The teachers were. That's all I remember. Oh, and then I used to take my lunch. They didn't have that. And they had these, maybe you remember, those 2-quart pails with syrup in it. Well, that was my lunch bucket. So she made me lunch in that every day when I walk to school. You know where we lived? There, to school. And Art, my cousins Art, Skylar and Harold, and I think Oscar. So there was 3 of them that I walked to school with. So one day, somehow or another, that they weren't in school. So I was all alone, and I went and I came back. When school was out, so I was all alone on the road. And as I got past, as I remember, past the Y there, going on 54, coming up the hill, then there was a car that came by, and he slowed up. He said, "Oh, little girl," he said, "you want to ride?" I said, no, thanks. I said, "I'll walk." But he was determined that I was going to get in that car. So then he come a little closer to the shoulder, and I walked more in a ditch. Then I knew that he wanted to pick me up, so then I just scooted across the field. I forgot, some Adams lived down there at that farm where the golf course is now. And he kept on, I suppose he thought, trying to coax me, and then after a while he showed me some coins, you know. So then I scooted across the field there, went tearing through those barbed wire fence, got home. My mother says, "What's happened to you?" She said, "Look at you, the way you look." My arms were kind of, you know, all scratched up, bleeding. My clothes were torn. And I told her, I said, because I said that man wanted to pick me up. So I knew enough to cross the field to get home. So she said I done real good by doing that. So that's all that was to that. Although my clothes, wondered why my clothes were all torn.
Now that's when you were living.
Yeah, in that little house.
Was there? Is there a Truman Dockstader that used to live around there?
Yeah, they lived down the hill from us with his sister Abby. Yeah, that's where he lived with her.
Did he used to play a musical instrument? Did he play music?
Well, not really,
No?
not him. It was his brother.
What was his brother?
Yeah,
What was his name?
Hyrie. I mean, no. You got me now there. I think it was Hyrie. He had a brother named by Hyrie Dockstader.
What did he play? Did he play a fiddle?
Yeah.
Did they have a lot of music when you were growing up that you went to?
Yeah, and they had a lot of square dances at this place. The house is still standing there, where they used to have, like, maybe every other Saturday night, evening, they'd have square dances there. And then Abby, the lady of the house, I said she done according to his music. I remember that.
Was there prohibition at the time? Where you couldn't have alcohol?
Oh, they had it. They had it at that time, as I remember, because I saw the bottles that they had it in, like pint bottles, half pint.
How old were you when you went to the square dances?
Must have been about, because we just lived a ways. My folks always went there. We just lived maybe a couple yards away from there. So I must have been about maybe 10.
You mentioned that you went to some other schools too.
Yeah, I went to Wittenberg when I was at the same time when we lived up there. I went there. I didn't go there so long. So I remember a little of that now. I must have been about 5 years old. Because the matron was very nice, and so were the teachers. And I was a chum to this little girl of the matron, so she kind of stuck to me. Well, we stuck together, so she'd always ask her mother if I could go in their quarters and sleep with her. So I did.
Then you went to the Oneida Mission? And
Well, I went there first. Then I went to Wittenberg, and then I went to Toma. That was it. Then after I came back from there, when it was my 3 years were up, then I went to Red Springs in Gresham. So that's where I learned how to make bread when I was at the mission school. I really liked that. And that time, nowadays they have only in packages, half, quarters, and some in pound. In them days they had it in chunks, only. They were white, they looked like lard. And so then the matron, the matron would have us, several of us girls go in and mix that butter. Then she'd have us wash our hands and clean all our fingernails. And then she'd bring this coloring out to make it look like butter. So we couldn't mix it this way, so we had to use our hands. So that's when I knew that there was something else besides butter.
When did you learn to make corn soup and cornbread?
Oh, well, I was married then when I learned how to make corn soup, but I never got to learn how to make the cornbread. I always wanted my grandma to show me, but she passed away before she could teach me.
Your grandmother made cornbread?
Yeah, my grandma Schuyler.
But do you still make your corn soup?
Off and on, when I feel like it.
Tell me what it would be like at the on Christmas when you'd go down to the stone church, and you used to go to midnight mass.
You mean at the stone church? Yes, I remember that. Well, now that was when I was a little girl, and my grandfather House used to come with a sleigh and team of horses. Great big long sleigh, and he'd have hay in there, or straw rather, and then he'd have lanterns so that we were kept warm to go to church. And then at that time, instead of giving what they do nowadays, they gave their stuff in bundles, great big bundles, and had stuff in there. And that's the way, and each family got one. So we always, on Christmas, we always went at midnight mass, 12 o'clock.
Who do you remember singing the Te Deum?
Yeah, I remember that.
Who would sing it?
Wait, no, I don't remember his name. But I know Oscar, after all, when he got into the family, I said he used to sing it. I wish I remember who that was.
Did they sing a lot of the hymns in Oneida?
Yeah, a lot of it.
You're telling me about the stone church. You're telling me about what Christmas was like, and when they on Christmas Eve.
Oh, well, we prayed and had. There was a lot of people that went at Christmas Eve because they sang the Christmas carols too. And then, of course, in the Oneida language, singing. And of course, then people went up and had communion and stuff like that. Then after this was over, then they bought these, they called them the Christmas bundles. There was things in there for everyone, like such as babies, small children, and for the adults, blankets in there, as I remember. And it was always at midnight, the service. And of course, then we never got home until maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. But then my grandfather always went home and he had 8 miles to go, him and my grandma. Then he'd go home. Sometimes, if there was a lot of snow. But other than that, if there was no snow, then he came in the buggy with a team of horses. What they call the two-seated buggies them days. I said you see one every now and then today. So that's it.
Now, after Christmas, they used to have what was called Hoyan.
Yeah, then,
What do you remember?
I know my mother used to make a lot of donuts, you know. Well, I guess most of the families there made them because then us kids here, we had to go from house to house and for New Year's that's the only thing we could say was Hoyan, Hoyan. And nowadays, I says they got the tricks and treating go. But some of us yet still have that on New Year's Day we have the homemade donuts. Still some of us say Hoyan. Us older ducks.
What about Easter? Do you remember anything about Easter?
Well, not really. It's just like Easter hunt. No, what they call the Easter hunt. They always boil their eggs and we colored them. And then they had candy, you know, fixed in little baskets. And of course then they had sunrise mass on that day, which is 6 o'clock in the morning. They had 2 masses always, one on 6 o'clock and one at 10.
What about gathering holy water?
Which one?
What about gathering holy water?
Oh, no, that, I know my husband did a lot of that. And,
Tell me how they do that.
well, he used to go to a spring where the spring is flowing. And then he'd always have his gallons ready for that day. Now, whether or not, as I remember, whether it was early Easter morning or Good Friday, I think it was Easter morning, he'd go out real early with these jugs and go where we had a flowing well near our place there. So the water kept running from the middle of the rocks. There'd be water coming out of there. So that's where he'd get the water. Those times that he had maybe 5-6 gallons saved. He'd done that every year up until he passed away. And then the ladies, Blanche, was that your grandma? And she says, now what are we going to do? She says, holy water. She said, he's gone. But they managed, I guess, after.
What do they do after they gather the water?
Well, they gave it to the priest. They gave it to him. Now, I don't know what he done with it. Whether he used it for baptism, I think that's what he used it for.
But this is all done Easter morning.
Mm-hmm.
You said you learned how to bake when you were in school. Was there any other crafts that you worked on? Now, Betty talked about the lace making. Did you?
Oh yes.
Did you do any lace making?
That too. She was the head lady was from New York, and she come out here. Do you remember Josephine Webster? Well, that's where she used to come and bring all this linen work with all kinds of embroidery stuff. And what she brought was real linen, and brought her own thread and stuff. And she asked Josephine if she knew of any other women. Now, there were some women that done bobbing work. Now, that's using like a crochet hook, and you stick it in through your fingers like that. And she made that. I think that was Elma Thomas, you remember her? Well, it was her mother that done, she was one. Now, I don't know about the rest. But then she got, then my mother got into the lace part, you know. She'd have all this linen tablecloth and runners, dresser runners, and pillow covers, and she'd have all that stamped out. So so she'd give it to whoever wanted to do it. So my mother done quite a bit of it, and then they got good pay, as she said, you know. Now, this lady that took all that, Josephine, she took all this linen, and they lived up, you know where they lived, on the other side of the church, up on the hill there? Well, there. And a lot of times when my mother got through with it, and they, like I said, they got good pay for it, and she'd get through with her. Sometimes she had two of them, two different kinds. So then she'd wrap it up and put it in a little bag. And then she says, oh, no, it's just getting torn down. And then she'd say, oh, she said, can you take that up there? She said, and give it to Josephine. Oh, I said, yes, well, she'd wanted me to go. But here in thought, I was always weary to go by the cemetery. It seemed like, because the boy, my cousins there, Harold and Art, and them, they'd always say, oh, they'll see ghosts when you go through there. Well, then they had really scaring me. But then, anyhow, would I ever run when I'd go through there, and I was all alone. So sometimes it was just getting toward dark when I'd have to go up there. And I always said to my mom, I said, why do you have to send me up there when it's getting dark? I said, I don't want to see those ghosts. So, well, anyway, nothing happened, but I was scared to come through there. So she done a lot of work from that lady from New York.
Did you ever see any ghosts coming through the cemetery?
No, just the stones standing there. No, I never saw.
They didn't catch you?
Huh?
They didn't catch you? The ghost didn't catch you?
No, didn't catch me up anyway.
What about the Oneida Singers? Did you know anything about those?
Well, not really, only that I know that they sang a lot of it too, especially to when anybody would pass away, and then they'd go to their house. Or that time, but now today they go to the funeral home.
Explain to me the difference, the way it was then and the way they do it now.
Well, I would say it's better this way, the way they do it now, than because sometimes your room was too small, you know, for them to all gather in. But that was one of the greatest things, is to sing the Oneida songs.
They said they sang for 3 days. Is that?
I remember, no, I'm talking back at my father's day. When he passed away, there was an old man. He lived back of High View. Maybe you remember, he's a real old man. You remember his Indian name? His Indian, I don't know his English name, but everybody called him Johannes. And he was a great singer, you know. So,
What does Johannes mean in English?
you know, I don't know. That's what I say.
Okay.
I don't know. And So then they'd come and sing. They came and sang, and so all the rest went. Then you know that this little old man I was telling you about, I said, he sat up all night singing off and on. And of course my mother would give him a little snack in between, you know, if he wanted it. But he stayed there until the day of the funeral. That's the way it was. Some of them stayed, I mean, but he was the only one that stayed that night there.
Did Oscar sing?
Oscar? Oh yes, In fact, he taught a lot of our younger people how to sing it.
Was he working on a hymnal?
Huh?
Was he working on a Oneida hymnal?
Yeah. Like I say, he had all this stuff. And I always say, where it went, nobody knows. It got legs.
Was there anything else that you, any kind of crafts that you worked on besides doing your baking? Did you do any basket making or rug weaving?
Not really. The only thing that I would help my mother can, that's all I done, you know. And wash good many diapers. She always done the worst part of it, and then because I'd ask her, and that time we went this way.
With the board.
Washboard.
Mm. What about drying food? Did you dry food? Did you
Dry food?
Dry, yeah.
Well, a little. I remember when my grandmother used to dry apples, and she said, "Oh, come here," she said, and will you help me? Of course, no, she's talking her language. Help me peel these apples, she said. And I said, "Oh, so many of them." I said, what you going to do with it? And she said, "Just a minute." She said, "I'll show you." And she had a long cord string. And then in these little holes of the apple, she'd have me thread it, you know, all the way through. After a while, the strings are so long. Then she'd hang it out on sunny days. She'd hang it outside. And then same way with the sweet corn. But in her days, she was quite old, and she'd help me. She'd ask me to help her with that, and we'd cut that corn down. Then she had a long board outside that the boys had fixed for her. Then she took something on the some kind of cloth on the bottom. Then she would put that corn on and spread it out and dried her corn like that. That's all I remember. Just.
What about fish?
Well, some of them salted their fish. They had great big crocks like that, and then they'd use this coarse salt. I remember, my mother done a little of it, and she'd take my dad showed her to put a little salt on the bottom, then layer by layer put salt. And then when you get ready to fix it, then she'd take it out and she'd soak it in cold water, drain it a couple times, and then she'd boil it or fry it. It was good, as I remember.
Did they used to catch suckers in the spring?
That what?
Suckers in the spring, fish. Do you recall?
No, I don't remember that.
Do you recall any? Was your father or your mother involved in the tribal government at the time?
Well, not really.
Was Oscar involved in the tribal government?
Oscar was. He was very much involved in all that.
Do you remember anything about that?
Well, not really. The only thing that I remember when him and Loretta used to go a lot. Like they went to Washington D.C. several times, stuff like that. But I never really took interest about what it was all about. The Oneidas.
What about Minnie Kellogg?
Well, somewhat was good and some not.
Did you know her?
I know her. I saw that her sister Alice. She used to be my teacher in kindergarten.
Where did Minnie Kellogg live?
Huh?
Where did Minnie Kellogg live?
I think she lived in Seymour. I think that's right. I got some pictures of her that were, they had a meeting one time as I remember, at the mission ground. And she was in it. There was a lot of, and Alice, and Ida Baird, and quite a few there's on there that I don't remember. And my grandma, Skylar, was on there. And they had wore all these, shells, them days. But other than that, I don't remember too much.
Do you remember anything about the Oneida Band?
No, I really don't, but they used to come out a lot for different occasions. It was really, as far as I remember, they really had a nice band.
What about the baseball teams? Did they used to play baseball?
Mm-hmm. They played baseball, they said. And at that time, it says, the Oneidas had a very nice team. That much I remember.
And that was the ball diamond behind the church?
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you were growing up and raising your family, did you work at home or did you work out in town?
Well, I done at home until they got a little bigger. Then I worked out. I done a lot of house cleaning when my children were bigger, so that I had my aunt stay there with them when I'd go when they got a little bigger, because some of them were in school and some were too little to go to school. They were home.
And how many children did you have?
Enough.
No, Vernon is one of
12 children.
12 children.
And two, one passed away at 27, and then the last one was a little boy. He died at birth. And then there was, let's see, 9, 10, 11 then, 11 living. Now there's 10. I just lost a son here a year ago in May.
And Vernon, which is he the oldest?
He's the oldest. Okay. There was one older than, that he is the oldest, and then there was the one that passed away was the next.
Did you ever hear of your dad talking about any of the, what they call religious societies or cheering that they did?
Mm-mm.
Like the St. Vitus dance and...
Oh, I never heard.
Now, when you retired, you went back to work. And where are you working now?
At the Turtle School.
And what do you do there?
Oh, help the teacher with different things for the children to do. I like it there.
How long have you been working at the Turtle School?
Well, at the Turtle School now, since they built that, I really don't know how long, but altogether from Norbert Hill Center, I've been with them since '84.
It's a long
And
time.
then before that, before I went to the foster grandparents, then I was with Green Thumb. I was with them for
I remember that.
2 or 3 years. Then they had me go up with the language. So I've been with them ever since.
Well, since you retired, you're busier now than before.
Yeah, well, that keeps me out of mischief.
What do you think is the best advice to give these young people that are coming behind you?
Well, what they're doing now, I says, they're doing fine. I said to keep on with their education. In fact, I got one that he was out of school quite a while now. Maybe you remember him, Sean King. Always in Wyoming. He's going to school there. He got a high honor credit. That's why he went. That's why he was sent there. And he's still going on. Now I got several nephews that are wanting to go back to school. So I says, is that ever nice? I says, keep up the good work.
With all the programs that are in Oneida, do you see anything that you'd like to see improved for the elders?
Well, I really couldn't say at the present time. But I know everything that's going on now is very fine. I really like what I'm doing, and then in fact they had asked me if I would go into the native speakers room with a couple of the teachers. So I just started Tuesday and went in. Of course I said I won't be able because I'm in this other foster grandparent room. So give my time over there. So then I go into the native language teachers. And in there maybe about an hour, 2 hours. Then from there, I'm ready to come home.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing all this with us, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Glad that I could come.
Okay, good. Thank you.